If you feel any symptoms like a fever, cough, difficulty in breathing, and chill, and please alert our staff members about your symptoms. Now, I'd like to start the international forum shortly. Thank you.
도시 정비사업지구 단위에서 온실가스 저감에 대한 의지가 반영될 수 있는 도시계획 분야 의사결정 지원 시스템으로 이루어져 있습니다. 도시평가 모델 시스템 UAMS는 도시의 기후변화를 평가 분석하는 모델입니다. 정책 결정자들에게 기후환경 부문에서 의사결정을 위한 정보를 제공하고 나아가 스마트시티 조성에 필요한 기후재난 통합관리 시스템이라 할 수 있습니다. 또한 UEA 사무국은 지식 공유와 역량 강화, 기후환경 기술과 정책을 공유하고 있습니다. 한국국제협력단, 코이카 글로벌 연수 프로그램, UN 기후변화협약, UNFCCC의 기술 메커니즘의 이행기구인 기후기술센터 네트워크, CTCN, 클라이밋 테크놀로지 센터 앤 네트워크 등과 함께 협력하고 유럽연합의 국제도시 협력기구인 EU YEOSU와 함께 도시간 매칭 협력 사업을 진행하기도 합니다. UEA는 회원 간 정례 모임인 UEA 정상회의를 2011년부터 개최하고 있습니다. 그리고 10년 만인 2021년 대한민국 여수시에서 정상회의를 개최합니다. 2021 UEA 여수 정상회의는 탄소 중립을 통한 지속가능 도시 실현의 테마로 진행되며 9월 29일에서 10월 1일 3일 동안 개최됩니다. 이번 회의는 UEA 회원도시, 국제기관을 비롯하여 각국 주한대사 및 외교관, 남해안 남중권 지역 지자체장, 청소년, NGO 등 다양한 분야에서 참여하여 탄소 중립 실현을 위한 목소리를 국제사회에 들려드릴 예정입니다. UEA 멤버십은 지속가능한 도시개발을 위해 힘쓰고 있는 전 세계의 모든 도시에 열려 있습니다. 회원 도시들은 공동 프로젝트 파트너십 기획, 교육 연수를 통한 지식 공유와 역량 강화, UEA 정상회의에 참여하고 직접 정상회의를 유치할 수도 있습니다. UEA 사무국은 여러분들의 참여를 기다리고 있습니다. UEA 사무국은 회원도시 여러분들의 참여를 기다립니다. 지속 가능한 도시, 여러분들과 우리 UEA가 함께 만들 수 있습니다.
네. 잠시 안내 말씀드립니다.
May I have your attention? We'd like to start the International Forum on Renewable Energy at 10 o'clock. Participants, please take your seats, and those of you who are still in the lobby, please come into the conference room. And for smooth proceeding of our conference, please take your seats. And as courtesy for others, put your mobile phones on a silent or vibration mode. Simultaneous interpretation between English and Korean is available. Number 1 is Korean and channel number 2 is English. You can find the interpretation device at your seat, and to prevent any loss, put the device at your seat when you leave. In accordance with the social distancing rule by the health authorities, please wear your mask at all times. And upon entry, check your body temperature and use hand sanitizers. And if you have any symptoms like fever, cough, difficulty in breathing, and chill, please alert our staff members of your symptoms. Now, I'd like to start the forum shortly. Please wait for a moment.
안녕하십니까.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to start the International Forum in Renewable Energy of the UEA YEOSU Summit 2021. My name is Chang Bong-hyun, Namdo Daily, today's moderator. I'd like to extend my gratitude to distinguished guests for being here despite your busy schedules. Today's session was organized to explore ways to transition to new and renewable energy, which is a crucial element for carbon neutrality, and share best practices and new and renewable energy industry cases as a future growth engine. I'd like to now introduce today's distinguished guest. We have Mr. Park Junil, the Executive Director of Namdo Daily. We have Mr. Chung Sun-nam, the Vice President of the Korea Battery Industry Association, who will be moderating today's discussion. Vice President Chung also served as the Economic Deputy Governor of Jeollanam-do Province. We also have Mr. Yoon Won-tae, the Director General of the UEA. Also, we have a special guest. We have His Excellency, the Kenyan Ambassador to Korea. Her Excellency, the Kenyan Ambassador to Korea.
다음으로
Next, I'd like to invite the speakers and discussants of the forum. We have Professor Cho Yong-sung, the former Director of the Korea Energy Economics Institute and Professor of Korea University, who will be delivering the keynote speech. We have Mr. Lee Ha-nu, the Industry Division Director of the Korea Energy Agency New and Renewable Energy Center. Mr. Lee is participating in this forum on behalf of the Director of the New and Renewable Energy Center. We have Mr. Hwang Jun-ho, the Director of the Southwest Coast Enterprise City Development Corporation. Let me now introduce today's discussants. We have Mr. Lee Sang-chan, Professor of Mokpo University. Mr. Kang Sang-in, a Senior Researcher of the Korea Environment Institute. Mr. Santiago Paredes Pinjon, the Director of Wind Towers Department of RAMBLE, and Mr. Pablo Gandara, Coordinator of IURC, are participating in the forum with pre-recorded videos. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Park Junil, the Director of Namdo Daily, for his opening remarks.
여러분 안녕.
Good morning, distinguished guest. I am Park Junil, Executive Director of Namdo Daily, in charge of this International Forum on Renewable Energy under 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. The COVID-19 pandemic is still raging, but many people are taking time out of their busy schedules to watch 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit online. Thank you for your participation. My gratitude also goes to YEOSU Mayor Kwon Ho-bong and President of International Climate and Environment Center, and also UEA Secretary General Yoon Won-tae. The erratic weather patterns emerging across the world is posing a threat to humanity. Climate crisis is an urgent issue that has to be dealt with right now. To tackle this global issue, countries across the world has come up with response plans and declared net zero. Korea also declared to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 by developing laws and policies while allocating more than 70 trillion won of budget every year to support the initiative. To put the declaration into reality, the will and commitment of leaders is important, but what is more crucial is the participation of local authorities through specific actions. In this regard, I believe it is truly meaningful for 156 cities from 51 countries to come together for environment and sustainable development through the UEA, communicating and take actions together. We need to recognize challenges before us and share the best practices through this YEOSU Summit. I wish its great success. Our situation is different from one another, but if we can just reach the consensus as members of this global community and join our wisdoms together, we can stop the worst for our ecosystem together. If we hold ourselves accountable and work together with trust, crisis can indeed be turned into opportunity. As the first session that opens the door to YEOSU Summit, we have this forum on renewable energy as a venue for a keynote speech, presentations, case studies, and panel discussion. Let me just introduce our distinguished guests. We invited Jung Sun Nam, Vice President of Korea Battery Industry Association and former Deputy Governor for Economy in Jeolla Province, to moderate this forum. Since this is an international forum, we also have participants from abroad. Santiago Paredes Pinzon, the head of Wind and Towers Department of Ramboll of Denmark, and Pablo Gandara, the IURC coordinator, as speaker and discussant, respectively. Korea University professor and former KEEI director Jo Yong-sung, industry director of Korea Energy Agency Renewable Energy Center Lee Han-woo, director of Southwest Coast Intercity Development Hong Jun-ho, director of Namdo Energy Industry Kim Shin-nam, Mokpo University professor Lee Sang-chan, senior researcher at Korea Environment Institute Kang Sang-in are participating in this forum, along with many experts and policy directors. Thank you for taking time to be with us. Your experience and insight to be shared today will lay the foundation for city-to-city collaboration and be incorporated into a report. To all participants who are with us here and via online, thank you, and actively participate, please, throughout this forum. I wish you health and happiness in this wonderful autumn. Thank you so much.
Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Kwon Ho-bong, the mayor of YEOSU, the host of today's summit. He have shared with us a pre-recorded video due to his commitment to the youth forum. Nice to meet you all, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kwon Ho-bong, mayor of YEOSU. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all participants to the 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. I'd like to also thank all the citizens joining us on YouTube YEOSU Story channel. The UEA YEOSU Summit is being held with leaders from more than 50 cities across the world to build beautiful cities that do not emit carbon. In order to realize carbon neutrality, we have to develop and commercialize new and renewable energy sources. I believe that today's forum will be a great opportunity to explore the prospect of new and renewable energy that will change the future of the world. In April this year, the city of YEOSU declared 2050 carbon neutrality. As a leading climate response city, YEOSU will continue to lead the efforts to make our city sustainable and achieve carbon neutrality. In addition, YEOSU will participate in the efforts of 12 cities and counties in the South Central region of Korea to host the COP28. I'd like to ask for your continued interest and support. Once again, thank you very much for joining us in the UEA YEOSU Summit. The discussions today will contribute to the future of sustainable cities. Thank you.
What is the welcome remark from YEOSU Mayor Kwon Oh. Now I'd like to invite the Yunonte, Secretary General of this organizer of this summit, to the podium for congratulatory remarks. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome all of the distinguished guests at the International Forum on Renewable Energy for 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit. Good morning. My name is Yunonte, and I'm the Secretary General of the UEA. First of all, let me express my gratitude to Vice President of the Korea Battery Industry Association, Jung Sun-nam, who will be chairing this forum, Korea University Professor Jo Yong-sung, who is the keynote speaker, and Industry Director of Korea Energy Agency Renewable Energy Center, Lee Han-woo, who will be making a thematic presentation along with the other presenters and panelists. My gratitude also goes to the organizers of today's International Forum on Renewable Energy, Namdo Daily President Kim Sung-ui and Director Seo Jung-hyun. According to Renewable Energy Policy Network for the 21st Century report, 55% of the world's population is now living in cities. Cities account for 3/4 of the global energy consumption by end users, emitting enormous amount of CO2. Therefore, their role to drive a transition to renewable energy for net zero is so important. I cannot emphasize more. Fortunately, after signing the Paris Agreement in 2015, greenhouse gas reduction has become mandatory, and 140 countries across the world declared net zero, facilitating discussion with 1,852 cities to make emergency declaration about climate crisis. 834 cities across the globe are now participating by setting goals for renewable energy usage. Also, in the coming COP26 conference to be held in Glasgow, the UK in November, NDC, the nationally determined contributions, will be raised, and financing climate change response and making a transition to green energy will be discussed as main agenda. Under this circumstance, in this session, we will discuss how cities and local authorities achieve net zero by turning to renewable energy. We will listen to presentations and discussions on renewable energy as our future growth and its ecosystem through various projects and case examples to share them with the UEA network and the rest of the global community. I believe to respond to climate change, the fourth industrial revolution should be leveraged to build a smart city that can adapt to climate change. Smart cities should support 3 goals. First, energy independence by transitioning to renewable energy. Second, smart transport network. And third, climate crisis response system, which is an integrated system to manage natural disasters. Building such a smart city will protect us from natural disasters brought by climate change and ensure sustainable growth of cities. By building smart cities, we will be able to achieve net zero along with energy independence and create resilient cities against climate crisis so that cities can protect the future for our next generations. Today's forum will be a great opportunity for member cities to share technologies and policies for renewable energy transition, defining the necessary partnerships and roles for the cities who are the key to climate crisis. Once again, congratulations on the opening of the Renewable Energy Forum of YEOSU Summit. I wish you a big success. Thank you.
네, 윤원태 사무처.
Thank you very much. Next, I'd like to invite Vice President Jung Sun-nam of Korea Battery Industry Association for his congratulatory remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, nice to meet you all. I am Jung Sun Nam, the Vice President of the Korea Battery Industry Association. As the MC introduced, I had served as the Deputy Governor for the Economy in the Namdo province. That was when I realized the importance of carbon neutrality in new and renewable energy. 8 years after that, I now see that carbon neutrality and new and renewable energy have become one of the national priorities and also global priorities. Now, I've heard the remarks of Mayor YEOSU and the Director General of UEA. So I'd like to make some comments that were not mentioned by the previous speakers. As you may have heard a lot in the media recently, there is the issue of collapsing supply chain leading to the sudden exponential increase in the prices of natural gas due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the oil prices have also increased exponentially. And with investments channeling to renewable energies, major energy businesses are cutting investments in the oil field and gas field exploration, leading to supply shortages in those resources. And there are other issues of supply shortage of coal from Australia, leading to shortages in electricity in many countries. These days, we talk about PBIG, which are key industries that the Biden administration is focusing on. And the media is discussing a lot of the impact of the US policies on the global market. And as I have learned a lot from the presentations of Professor Cho Young-sung, who will be delivering the keynote shortly, Korea has to consider the limitations in its environmental and geographical circumstances in making efforts to increase the share of renewable energy and with detailed strategies. There's another point I'd like to touch upon. Korea is one of the Korea is a country with one of the highest share of manufacturing industry in the world. For example, it cost 60 trillion won to replace the steel mill in Gwangyang so that we can meet the carbon emission standards. And it would cost 1,300 trillion won to store the electricity produced with renewable energy sources in batteries. So this is a huge challenge for Korea. And these days, people even say there is greenflation happening, meaning there's a lot of money needed to invest in carbon neutrality. That's why public corporations are raising electricity cost and natural gas cost. And I believe these challenges should be met so that we can successfully achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vice President Chung Sun-nam, for touching upon the challenges of Korea. This will be the end of the opening part, and we will now move on to the keynote speech and thematic presentations.
Now, I would like to have a keynote speech and thematic presentations. The keynote speech will be delivered by Professor of Korea University Cho Yong-sung under the title of Climate Crisis and Carbon Neutrality Transition to Renewable Energy. From 2018 to 2021, Professor Cho Yong-sung chaired the Korea Energy KEEI, and he's now a member of the Carbon Neutrality Commission. Now I'd like to invite Professor Cho Yong-sung to the podium for a keynote speech.
오늘
Thank you very much for inviting me to this meaningful event. I'm given 20 minutes, so I will touch upon the challenges we have to overcome in this relatively short time. So on this slide, you see the covers of Time magazine. And there are two important images. First, there are glaciers melting with this title, One Last Chance. And next to it is the icon of the future, Greta Thunberg. So the two images show the urgency of climate response and at the same time the demand of the future generation to all of us now. Now we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And let's take a look at what's changing throughout the world. With the pandemic, the global economic growth rate posted negative 2.6% in 2020. This negative economic growth impacted the global energy market. In 2020, the global energy consumption growth rate was negative 4%. The consumption growth rate was 2% annually between 2000 and 2018, and in 2019, 0.8%. However, last year, it was negative 4%. Breaking down by country, except for China, most countries showed negative growth in energy consumption. This was only seen back in 2009 in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, when the energy demand decreased by 0.9%. So this really shows that the energy consumption decrease in 2020 is significant. Actually, this is the largest decrease since the end of World War II. This leads to the decrease in carbon emissions. In 2020, carbon emissions decreased by about 5%, pushing the global emissions to the 2012 levels. Now, Korea is experiencing similar situations. In 2020, final energy consumption stood at 222 million TOE, which is 4.0% less than the previous year. Now, this decrease was the first since the decrease in 2009. And back in 2009, the decrease was only by 0.5%, which is 1/8 of the decrease in consumption in 2020. So this led to the decrease in the greenhouse gas emissions. The emissions of Korea peaked in 2018 with 728 million ton CO2 equivalent, and decreased by 3.8% in 2019 and by 7.3% in 2020. So this shows the decrease in emissions for 2 consecutive years for the first time in Korea's history. The bad news is that the decrease in emissions was not achieved by human effort. So this is what they call the paradox of the COVID-19 pandemic. This article says when the human race stop, the earth is getting healthier. This photo illustrates that the human race have forgotten what's really important in our lives. Thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic, maybe the pandemic is a warning from nature to the human race. So 5 years ago, in the Yamal Peninsula of Siberia, a 12-year-old shepherd died of anthrax. And according to BBC, climate change was the reason behind that. Based on epidemiological investigation, due to the heat wave of 2016, the permafrost melted, and the dead body of a reindeer that died of anthrax 75 years ago appeared on the surface of the earth. That led to the anthrax contagion of the surrounding water, soil, and grass, which led to the death of more than 2,000 wild reindeers and people in nearby villages. And in May 2020, the World Bank said that the fight against the pandemic is the fight against climate change. There are 4 reasons for that. First of all, climate change leads to higher risk of infectious disease. Air pollution leads to airborne transmission of virus, exacerbating the pandemic. With the melting glaciers and permafrost, ancient diseases will be revived, and the temperature rise will lead to weaker immune system of the human body. And as this image shows, our fight against the pandemic is our short-term challenge, but after that there is a much bigger challenge, which is climate change. So climate change used to be considered as a threat of a distant future. Now it is recognized as an imminent threat. That's why people even say climate crisis instead of climate change. With climate change, typhoon, heat wave, cold spell, and other extreme weather events will exacerbate. And environmental refugees or climate refugees are appearing. This is a message from Al Gore, who used to be the vice president of the US. He published the book, The Inconvenient Truth, and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'd like to quote him. The inconvenient truth does not appear, even though it is not seen in front of us. If we continue to ignore inconvenient truth, its importance actually grows bigger. If we start acting right now to overcome the environmental crisis, we can shape our future in a different way. So let's take a look at how the international community has responded to climate crisis. As you may well know, the Kyoto Protocol was adopted in 1997 with the focus on developed countries. There have been many efforts to cut emissions, but those efforts have been successful only in half. That's why the Paris Agreement was adopted. This is what we call the new climate regime that includes all countries across the world. And the IPCC General Assembly published the 1.5 degrees Celsius special report, which says that we have to limit the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees from the pre-industrial levels. Responding to this message of the IPCC, the discussion on carbon neutrality and declaration on carbon neutrality has spread since 2019. And businesses across the world are joining the commitment to use renewable energy for 100% of its energy use. This is what we call the RE100 campaign. So the roadmap of the new climate regime is for the world to reach a turning point in 2021, achieving the greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets by 2030 and achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. Now, Korea is an export-driven economy. And we will be hit very hard by carbon tariffs by other countries. So how cheap our products are and how high the quality of our products are, we won't be able to export a lot because we will be challenged by the carbon tariffs. On the right, you see the list of countries that declared the ban on the sales of internal combustion engine vehicles. So some countries declared that would be 2025, others 2030 or 2035. So it means Korean vehicles won't be able to be sold in other countries if we continue to emit carbon with internal combustion engine. And there are many other initiatives of governments across the country that mandate businesses to use renewable energy and achieve near zero carbon emissions. So that's why we have no other way but to follow this trend. That's why the government established the Carbon Neutrality Commission for 2050, and the Commission published 3 carbon neutrality scenarios. So in the slide, you see 2 different sets of scenarios. On the left, you see the energy demand scenario. So it's about who will be using energy. And on the right, you see the final energy demand, which means which type of energy will be used. And the common premise for the 2 sets of scenarios is the energy consumption. The amount of energy consumption will decrease by 2050. So people might ask why this should happen and what happens to the Korean economic growth. So here's my personal answer to that question. So under these scenarios, Korea will continue to grow economically. Here the economic growth won't be as rapid as in the past, according to the KDI. And the growth rate will be very low, below 1%. And the society will go through low birth rate and aging of the population, which means less energy consumption per person and higher energy efficiency. That is why the energy consumption by 2050 will decrease from now. To be more specific, the energy consumption will decrease by 0.3% or 2.9%. So in 2050, the industry will be using much of the energy, and we will have to utilize hydrogen and CCUS technology. And on the right side, you see we will have to cut the use of fossil fuels, and we will use a lot more electricity and hydrogen. So with these energy consumption scenarios, this is what's going to happen with carbon emissions. So there are 3 scenarios as also. And scenario 3 is actually the only scenario with 0 carbon emissions, and scenario 1 and 2 have some carbon emissions left. There is some criticism for this, but the 2 scenarios on the left means that we will do everything we can to cut emissions, and if we still have to emit carbon, we will offset the emissions with cooperation with other countries. So there have been a lot of discussion on these scenarios, and the focus has been the source of electricity, which will account for more than 50% of final energy demand. And on the bottom right, you see the renewable sources will have to account for more than 60% and even 70%. And although there are some differences among the scenarios, we'll have to use hydrogen and CCUS technology. Of course, there are many other approaches and discussions on our scenarios. Now, there have been many criticisms. Some believe that the carbon neutrality scenarios are not actually achieving carbon neutrality. Others say the scenarios are unrealistic. And in my opinion, I believe we have to discuss on the scenarios with alternatives. Now we are at a crossroads. We have to choose between changing or being changed by others. So now is the time to discuss, not to discuss about why, but how. Still, the global dependence on fossil fuels is still huge, about 80% as of 2018. And when it comes to electricity, more than 70% come from fossil fuels. And the non-fossil fuel sources are still dominated by hydropower. And when it comes to the different types of energies we use every day, thermal, transport, and power, the ratio of these 3 types of energies is now 5 to 3 to 2. And the share of power should increase to more than 50%, which means a huge transformation of the global energy system. But I believe we have almost reached a turning point. Based on the BP publication, despite the massive decline in global energy demand, global renewable energy consumption grew by 10% in 2020. In particular, coal consumption fell by 15.2%. So from this turning point, the transition or transformation will be huge and rapid. It's about 20 years, from 20 years ago, there have been some countries using renewable energy sources, and recently, many Asian countries are using renewable energy sources. And on the right, you see the different kinds of renewable energy sources. The light blue is wind, yellow is solar. And solar power started to increase exponentially from 2010. In this chart also shows the shares of different types of renewable energy sources. Blue means hydropower, which still accounts for a huge part, but we see exponential growth in the shares of solar photovoltaic and onshore wind energy. And this transition will only accelerate due to changing cost analysis. So according to LCOE, wind power, onshore wind power and solar power are becoming very, very cheap. And recently, the International Energy Agency published a report titled Net Zero by 2050. And one of the key messages in the report is the next 10 years matters. So according to the IEA's estimation, the global economy will grow by more than 40% by 2030, but the energy consumption have to be reduced by 7%. And in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, we have to make effective policy efforts for clean and effective energy by 2030. The IEA also suggests the prospect that the solar and wind power capacity will increase by 4 times in the next 10 years. So let me briefly talk about the renewable energy status of Korea. And one of the key aspects of our future energy strategies. It's important for Korea to secure the necessary minerals for energy transition. So on the right side, you see a list of strategic minerals. And this chart shows the geography with the reserves of these minerals. Now, Korea is very much dependent on oil and gas imported from other countries. And when we talk about energy transition, we have to also consider what kind of minerals we need and from which country. And another key issue is to how to dispose of waste from wind power and solar power facilities, including wind blades. The last message from me is we can only create a new future by abandoning what's familiar to us. Thank you very much.
네, 교수님께서
Well, the professor talked about the climate crisis, carbon neutrality, and transformation into new renewable energy. That was a great presentation. Please give a big round of applause to our keynote speaker. Now, I would like to invite our speaker from Korea Energy Agency. His name is Lee Han-ho, and he's the industry manager of New Renewable Energy Center. His presentation is about deployment of renewable energy across Korea. Well, Lee Sang-un was supposed to come here as a thematic presenter. He is the chair of our center, and because of his busy schedule, I'm here on his behalf, as I feel very pressured to give a great presentation as he is, so I will just do my best. So I will just narrow my topic into Korea and its strategy and government policies for renewable energy. So new climate regime has been just launched, and it was very explained in detail by the previous speaker. And IEA has suggested to increase energy efficiency and wider deployment of new renewable energy. And worldwide, I think the movement is being made right now by many countries, like the sovereign fund and the financial sectors and the businesses. They are paying more attention to the risk related to climate change, and there are so many programs being facilitated to induce participation of the private sector. And the technology advancement is creating a tangible results, changing the prices and cost of the renewable energy. If we look at the PV models, in 1975, it was just $101 per watt, and now it has been reduced to $0.21 in 2019. It is a rapid decrease, but this is a global price. In Korea, the price is just $0.25, a bit higher, but this shows the general trend. And the PV module efficiency has been increased from 10.7 to 19.8 in just 10 years, which is quite surprising. And I believe that now the 70% of newly generated energy is renewable energy. Now we cannot invest heavily in the traditional energy resources. If you look at this neighboring countries, or if you look at just around the world, then when there is a new solar power plant, then we just went there to have a look. But now solar power plant or PV panels, solar panels, they are very common sights to see. In 2020, the Korean government has defined the fifth renewable energy technology development and usage and deployment. This plan is about the detailed plans that will be implemented for the next 15 years. It suggested the greenhouse gas reduction targets, and it offers the evaluation about the renewable energy technology status and the deployment plan to be on par with any other advanced economies in terms of the renewable energy deployment. And now the government is trying to align the various plans for new renewable energy, the deployment, so any gaps and differences between the government plans and national plans are being reduced. If you look at the plans for renewable energy, before the thermal power plant or coal-fired power plant, it was the primary energy supplier. But now it is being replaced by LNG and renewable energy. So before, coal and LNG were primary energy providers, and now LNG and renewable energy are becoming major or primary energy providers. Last year, it was renewable energy deployment rate was just 1.7%, and many people just had this skeptic ideas about Korea would be advanced in terms of renewable energy deployment. But if we look at the current status compared to just 1 year before, Korea is making great strides. So there are several points to remember in the fifth renewable energy basic plan. First one is the consideration of the improvement of the grid and the introduction of hydrogen energy and others. Among energy sources, renewable energy, how much proportion it would account for, and how higher targets should be defined. Now the government is paying attention or turning its attention to how to secure demand for renewable energy. So it is moving its focus from supply-driven to demand-driven. Also, the government is also trying to change the energy paradigm by introducing hydrogen energy. And the second point to remember in the fifth basic plan for renewable energy is that it suggests 4 major challenges to be achieved. First is to identify potential sites for renewable energy deployment and innovate the methodologies of deploying renewable energy. And the second goal is to make a technological breakthrough and reinforce renewable energy as a tool for energy security. And the third point is to encourage the grid transformation of the power system. At first, when the renewable energy was deployed, the power companies were very against it because renewable energy adoption would bring some instability to the existing power system. But now renewable energy is using the existing facilities and it's not putting any major burden on the existing grid. But as the supply of renewable energy increases, however, it could put some burden on the existing grid, so existing grid has to be improved to accommodate the supply from renewable energy sources. So this is the vision and the strategy of the fifth renewable energy plan. The vision is that we have to accelerate our transition into the low-carbon economy and society. And the strategy is about how to efficiently, effectively, and promptly deploy renewable energy to meet such target. And creating an effective market is also a mandate. Government cannot just keep giving subsidies for renewable energy. So renewable energy should have a viable market with various market mechanisms to survive. And to make that possible, we need to create demand that can lead to more supply. And we also have to accelerate the transition from R&D result to the actual product in the market. And as I said earlier, the grid should be improved to accommodate renewable energy with a better operation and management system. If you look at the challenges for deployment of renewable energy, the government permits and approvals took a very long time, and the process itself was quite complex. Local authorities should also give permits after the central government gave a permit. So there was a need for a unified and streamlined process for a government permit, like the master shop or one-stop shop. So regulation improvement is another challenge that we have to achieve. There are so many details. I will just say to you some keywords. So we have to give the final decision-making power to local authorities, diversified financial support for renewable energy, and since the renewable energy would have a very diverse types of facilities, and safety management system should be deployed also. And I think you will all know that RPS is a very important mechanism that is leading the development of the renewable energy market. Right now, the price for RP is decreasing, so we have to think about the ways to overcome the price issue in the market. And RFS should be also heightened to encourage more participation of the power suppliers, and not just power, the hydrogen and the thermal energy should be also used as the sources for renewable energy. The government is also looking at diversifying the demand side so that more people can participate in RE100 by providing various incentives for participation. And the renewable energy generation for self-consumption should be also recognized as some RECs that can be one incentive for participants. What is important for Korea is to industrialize this renewable energy sector. When it first tried to deploy renewable energy. So deployment rate has been increased to some extent, and it was evaluated that the renewable energy is changing the power mix of Korea. But if you look at the industry of renewable energy itself, it has not made such a big progress, and it did not make any major contribution to changing our industrial structure. Therefore, in the fifth basic plan, there are some ways or strategies to develop the renewable energy industry itself. The next challenge or the next task is innovating the infrastructure. There are many initiatives under this, expanding the existing facilities or building new facilities, or utilizing the excess supply by developing energy storage facilities so that we can match supply and demand more effectively. I believe that the renewable energy is a crucial tool to achieve the target of net zero. Therefore, we need more diverse participants and methodologies to realize net zero. One of them is to increase the potential supply of renewable energy, and it has to be led by the public sector and communities through various programs. And the previous speaker mentioned energy security, and energy security is also a very important topic that we are pretty much thought into this topic. We cannot just keep on using the key materials, because the key materials for renewable energy is so expensive. So we need to have mid to long-term strategy, such as recycling the key materials or having a secure supply source of key materials. And right now, there's a pilot plant in the Chungbuk area for solar energy, and this type of pilot project to secure key materials should be spread to other regions as well. And I just mentioned the great transformation of the grid system, so I will skip this. And the next task is the green hydrogen expansion. and it has to be connected into the market mechanism, and this demand and supply should be matched to have a more efficient market. I already mentioned this slide. It is about securing a stable supply. Right now, BIT is emerging as a key topic. The PV models in rural areas or the salt mines. And it is impossible for us to just identify new sites for renewable energy, and these sites are not eco-friendly even. So we have to use the buildings in the urban areas. The walls of the buildings can be used as sites for PV generation, and how to use these buildings as resources for PV generation would be incorporated into coming policies and the strategies of the government. And in this mandate, the local authorities should play a key role. And these local RPS will be introduced in the areas apart from Seoul metropolitan area, so that local authorities can play a leading role in the RPS scheme. Another task is to advance and innovate supply, transfer and trade technologies of renewable energy. Renewable energy has this constraint of supply fluctuation, and to overcome this unstable supply, is the power grid system should be integrated into the power grid of other types of energy sources. There is a controversy surrounding green hydrogen. Some people say that if it is not green hydrogen, it is not eco-friendly energy source. Of course, our ultimate goal is to generate green hydrogen, but there's this mismatch between supply and demand, which is the largest problem for green hydrogen. And especially how to overcome the long distance between supply and demand, that has to be dealt with through sector coupling. Like the offshore wind power, how it can be transported into the demand site, and by using green hydrogen. And the CO2 coming from the process of improving LNG, they can be combined with other energy sources to produce a different type of green hydrogen, like a P2L or P2G. And other unused sites that can be used as a power generation sites for renewable energies. As of this year, the government-owned assets or government-owned lands will be disclosed to the public because the renewable energy companies, they are having a hard time to find an appropriate site for their renewable energy generation. So we could disclose this information so that they can develop the renewable energy generation sites on the government-owned plots or land. And this new change of legislation will be enforced this coming October. So I already explained the one-stop shop for the PV generation or renewable energy generation for self-consumption that can also receive incentives from the government through this one-stop shop. And even renewable energy generation technology can be used as a guarantee to get financing from financial institutions. Before, in the RPS market, the power generators they can participate in the selective bidding, mandatory bidding, or sole sourcing contract. But now, the sole sourcing contract cannot be adopted in would be only used in projects led directly by the local authorities, and other projects would not use this sole sourcing method, and all of the projects other than those directly funded by the local authorities will adopt a competitive bidding system. The government is also encouraging that the more various participants can just be involved in this renewable energy projects. I also skipped this part since I already mentioned this information. I think I already used up all the time given to me, so I'd like to wrap up my presentation here. Yes, that was the Lee Han-woo from the Korea Energy Agency. He talked about how to expand the deployment of renewable energy in the Korean market. Thank you for your great presentation.
또 친환경
Next, we'll invite Mr. Hwang Jun-ho, the Director of Southwest Coast Enterprise City Development Corporation, on the theme of building up solar city, Jeonnam Eco-Future City. From 2012 to 2019, Mr. Hwang served as the Vision Implementation Team Leader, and now serving as Bosong Smart City Development Team Director. Nice to meet you all. My name is Hwang Jun-ho. It's a great honor for me to introduce the Solasido project. Today I'll first talk about the Solasido project, because many people still don't know about what this project is. Next, I will talk about the vision and concepts of Solasido. And lastly, Solasido as a vehicle for the Green New Deal. So this is an urban development project. Today we talk a lot about new and renewable energy in this forum. But from the perspective of urban areas as a vehicle for green development, renewable energy is sustainable only when we have the businesses in urban areas that support the use of the energy. And I believe building urban areas is only possible when it secures its own energy, and at the same time supported by its own transportation system. So what the Solasido mean? It's an term that combines solar, lake, sea, and do, which means city. So it's a public-private partnership based project led by the Namdo provincial government and cities in the project area. So the Solasido project is planned and implemented by businesses, academia, citizens, developers, and private sector experts. And the Solasido project is differentiated from existing development projects. Now, urban development project is an irreversible work with a lot of money and resources necessary. Under the existing paradigm, the development was implemented as a whole by the provider of the urban area. However, in this existing paradigm, there is no space for the participation of the people on the demand side. That's why we adopted the new paradigm for this project. So compared to the existing paradigm of urban development, Solacito project seems slower and delayed, but I believe actually this is the new and desirable paradigm. So this is the overall plan of the project. Solacito has Korea's largest solar photovoltaic facility and the world's largest ESS. Now, this is not just an electricity supply infrastructure. In terms of urban development, this is part of the infrastructure where people and nature coexist. And that's why on the top right, you see the image of the solar garden. And in the solar photovoltaic facility, you see a small garden in the middle of it. We planted new trees in the garden. Where people can visit the facility and see how the renewable energy facility can coexist with nature and people. And today we talk a lot about RE100, and there are many local governments thinking about this concept, and we will also develop an industrial complex based on RE100 initiative. So these are 5 pillars of the Solacito vision, and I believe in today's forum we can focus more on the eco-friendly, environment-friendly eco-city and smart city in the bottom of the slide. Now, any urban development project has to now contribute to the carbon neutrality target of the government. And we consider this as one of the core pillars of the project. So this was before we started using the term carbon neutrality. So we used the term environmentally friendly eco-city. So this pillar includes green areas, pedestrian path, waterway, maritime area, electrification, solar energy, passive house, and RE100. This pillar is connected to another pillar of smart city, which includes 5G communication technology, big data, IoT, and artificial intelligence. So this is a vision we established in 2019. And the details in the vision are now integrated in our urban development plans. And as we implemented these plans, new concepts and discourses arose, including the carbon neutrality and RE100. And as I said earlier, if we adopted the existing paradigm of urban development, these new concepts couldn't make their way into our plans. But as we adopted the new paradigm, which is more flexible and demand-side centered, we can add new concepts and discourses in the project. And there are four key development concepts in Solasido. First of all, environmentally friendly garden city. Second, solar energy city. Third, electric and autonomous vehicle city. And fourth, contactless city. So let me talk a little bit about garden city, which is different from our discussion on renewable energy. After the government's declaration of carbon neutrality by 2050, many local governments across the country have established plans on garden city. As you may well know, Suncheon is well known for its national gardens, and cities like Chuncheon have established plans to build garden cities. The garden city of Solasido has its unique features. In the conventional urban planning, there is this concept of zoning, which means you divide the areas into different zones: commercial, residential, and industrial. However, the concept of garden city in Solasido is we create the entire city as gardens, as a set of gardens. And these different gardens will be networked with pedestrian paths and waterways. And as you see in this image, there will be 9 gardens in total in the city. They will work as the core green areas that are connected by the green network and the blue ecological corridor. And the garden here has actually very diverse elements. It is not just about water and trees. So we are not going to create some lakes just to reserve water in between urban areas. We will take the approach of low-impact development in which we use existing ecological infrastructure such as forest, wetland, tidewater channel, and hills. So that we can achieve real harmony between the areas of human residence and nature. And we're going to apply a lot of technologies, and we believe they should enable people to experience nature. And there are more detailed concepts for the different gardens. And let me now move on to solar power. Now, we believe urban areas can be used as a strategic vehicle. And this is many people talk about new and renewable energy from the supply side perspective. But from the perspective of urban areas, the consumption side is more important. That's why we established the plan on RE100 industrial complex. Now, Jeollanam-do province has a lot of potential for renewable energy supply, but we also need the demand, the businesses that will use electricity generated from renewable energy sources. And for that, we need to improve the electricity distribution system. And for successful implementation of these plans, we need to provide incentives to the businesses that will come to the RE100 industrial complex. So I believe this will be critical for Salcedo to contribute to the Green New Deal. So with these plans, we will work hard to attract businesses to the RE100 industrial complex, just like other local governments. And the key challenges here would be how fast we can start producing new renewable energy, and how much cost we can reduce for the businesses who will use the energy. And we also need a differentiated residential environment for people who will work in the businesses. So we need to, of course, consider the proximity between the renewable energy facilities and the industrial complex. And in addition, we need to provide favorable residential environment for the people in the businesses. Next, electric and autonomous vehicle city. So electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles should be part of the overall eco-friendly mobility system. So this vision has been at the center of the Salcedo project from the beginning. So we have 5 core values of transportation in Salcedo: safety, eco-friendliness, inclusiveness, seamlessness, and connectedness. So the success of this vision will depend on how much can we regulate carbon emissions from vehicles. Now, many automakers say they will stop producing internal combustion engine vehicles by 2030 or 2035. But these companies have different roadmaps. And their roadmaps are not completely consistent with the global carbon neutrality 2050 targets. So if we are going to restrict internal combustion vehicles in Salcedo, we can actually start doing that earlier than the roadmaps of automakers, if we can provide enough incentives for them to participate. So it is not going to be the supply side determining the year in which we are going to ban internal combustion engine vehicles. And it'll be more like the citizens living in the Solocido who will declare that they don't want internal combustion engine vehicles in their city from a certain year. So again, the focus is really on the demand side. And I hope that other urban development projects across the country would also adopt the same perspective. And as I mentioned briefly regarding the RE 100 industrial complex, we need to create a residential or living environment that is comparable to large cities. That's why we believe the vision of smart city is also important. With services available for people such as education, online concert, contactless delivery, and so on. There are now many projects going on in the Solar City. I believe some of the participants here have already visited Solocido. Solocido has an area of more than 2 million square meters for pilot housing, which will be crucial in creating the enabling environment for the city and the businesses. And I hope we can have more opportunities for us to invite you to Solocido on the occasion of the next UEA Summit. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Hwang Junho. Next, we'd like to take a look at the video recorded by Mr. Santiago Padres Pinjon, the Wind and Tower Department Director of Ramble.
Dear attendees, it is an honor for me to speak about the development of offshore wind projects and the challenges that a new market like South Korea will face in the coming years. No one can undermine the relevance of offshore wind in the country's plans to reach the near-term goals of the Paris Agreement and further down the road, by 2050, net zero. Developing 12 gigawatts of offshore wind in South Korea during the next decade is a bold and gargantuan undertaking requiring local and international experience to make it a reality. South Korea is poised to become the next big market in offshore wind in Asia. However, the successful implementation of the first commercial projects will also help South Korea position itself as a key player in the global offshore wind market. The success of any major infrastructure project, like an offshore wind power plant, lies, to a large extent, in the adequate planning and the selection of the most cost-effective technical solutions. Such planning calls for expertise in technical, commercial, market, and political aspects. Smooth interaction of these elements in a sound and robust project execution plan is paramount in the success of these first projects. But before we get into the details of the presentation, allow me to introduce Ramble. Ramble is an international engineering, design, and management consultancy to both the public and the private sector. The company was founded in 1945 in Denmark, and our mission is to create sustainable societies where people and nature flourish. We employ 16,000 experts and work for more than 35 countries with a particularly strong presence in the Nordics, the UK, Americas, continental Europe, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. We are owned by the Ramble Foundation, which means that our activities are independent of any external or personal interests. We have no ownership or financial ties with contractors or suppliers. We provide services across markets including buildings, transport, water, environment and health, energy, and management consulting. By the first quarter of 2022, Ramble will have local presence in South Korea. This will help us bring to the market both international experience and local know-how, which is key to the success of offshore wind projects. Ramble has been delivering consultancy and engineering services for wind power projects since 1986. With more than 300 consultants, engineers, project managers, and specialists, we provide the full range of consultancy services that are needed in all stages of projects. Our holistic approach to project delivery allows us to provide valuable insight to our clients. Ramble is well known for its track record in structural design, having designed close to 50% of all existing foundations at sea. In the past few years, Ramble has also managed to secure projects delivering owner's engineering services both in Asia and the United States. Our extensive experience with oil and gas projects puts us in a unique position to help clients in the transition to offshore wind. Now that you know who we are, let's get into the details of the presentation. So what does it take to develop successful offshore wind projects, and what are the challenges in South Korea? Ramble's experience shows that there are 4 key aspects to developing successful projects. The first is knowing and selecting the best technology for the project. The number of options available to a project can be daunting. From selecting the size of the wind turbine to the type of substructure and then the installation methods, a developer may result with a matrix of choices that can be difficult to navigate. In the Korean context, one of the most interesting challenges from a technology point of view will be the industrialization of floating structures. The projects off the coast of Ulsan will most likely lead the way, and the selection of the floating concept and its fabrication lead times will have a significant impact on the commercial success of the projects. Fabrication suppliers will also see how developers make different choices in terms of floating concepts, and this will lead to challenges when trying to standardize components. Second, it is of extreme importance to work across the entire value chain. This is, going from idea to implementation and then operations. It is not uncommon for developers with limited offshore wind experience to oversee the importance of considering the impact of operations on a project. Capital expenditure typically takes center stage in the early stages, while operational expenditure can take the back seat. However, correctly addressing OPEX in the development stage of a project ensures an overall sound business case and must therefore not be overlooked. It goes without saying that the installation of the asset is also a vital driver of the project's success. To address this matter in other emerging markets in Asia, it is not uncommon to have the installation contractor involved in project discussions from the beginning, sometimes even as a partner in the consortium developing the project. The third key aspect is having a thorough understanding of the commercial aspects of offshore wind. A robust development strategy typically contains an exhaustive understanding of the local regulatory framework and insight into financing, construction, and operations. A sound technical concept provides a solid basis for the project's development strategy. Each project's commercial and contracting strategy will depend on the developer's capabilities to manage the vast number of interfaces a typical offshore wind project has and a balanced risk profile. In the context of Korean projects, many developers' options seem to be leaning towards an EPCI contracting structure instead of a multi-contract approach. For EPCI contracts, it is paramount that the developer can ensure the contractor can manage all commercial aspects across the value chain. Last but not least, the fourth essential element in the development of successful offshore wind projects is a balanced mix of international and local experience. Undoubtedly, one of the benefits of offshore wind is how it can be a vehicle to boost the country's economy by providing local jobs. South Korea's industrial sector is uniquely well prepared to meet the demands of the booming offshore wind industry in Asia, particularly when it comes to the fabrication of complex steel components. jacket fabricators in Korea are already delivering jobs for projects in the region, which will undoubtedly give them a competitive advantage when tendering for local projects. Large Korean shipyards are also well positioned to create jobs, particularly for floating structures. But Korean companies still lack experience in three critical stages of offshore wind projects: project development, transfer installation, and operations. Here's where developers need to seek international expertise to ensure that projects are delivered cost-effectively. Now, let us dive deeper into a generic project model that can help us understand some of the main development activities of an offshore wind farm. In general, there are two main phases when developing an offshore wind project. The first one we can call the planning phase, or simply project development, which will lead us to the final investment decision, FID. The second, which for practical matters we will call the execution phase, will then result in the commercial operations date, COD. Following COD comes the asset management phase, or simply operations, which in the case of an offshore wind power plant can be anything between 20 and 27 years. Following operation comes decommissioning. We want to highlight that both operations and decommissioning phase can significantly impact the business case of the entire project. Therefore, it is vital to consider them during the project development phase. Now, let's take a closer look at the development phase. The first thing a developer typically does is acquire an in-depth understanding of the site conditions that eventually leads to creating the design basis. To achieve this, developers usually carry out feasibility and desktop studies to understand the technology and the range of options available to the project. In the Korean context, we see that the range of options for wind turbine technology is wider than in other emerging markets, as local wind turbine suppliers Doosan and Unison are entering the scene. Developers also commission initial offshore surveys and wind measurement campaigns to provide factual data that can then be used as the basis for conceptual designs. These will result in the first set of tangible quantities, for instance, the weight of the foundations or the expected annual energy production. These could then be used as input to the developer's financial model, yielding a preliminary capex budget. Often, the developer will not be able to define all parameters of the design basis, and therefore it needs to rely on reasonable assumptions based on previous experience. To this end, it is essential to have suppliers that can bring this knowledge from other projects. It is important to remember that the regulatory requirements shall frame the feasibility studies and the range of options for the project. Close interaction and communication between the teams working on the technical concept and the regulatory requirements is paramount. Once the concept and feasibility stage is complete, a decision gate will indicate if the project should carry on and if further expenses shall be incurred before entering the design, engineering, and contracting stage. Bearing in mind that the outcome of the project's planning phase is reaching FID, developers typically decide to invest significant resources in having a complete understanding of the site conditions. A good example is the final geotechnical campaign that will provide the basis for the detailed engineering of the foundations. In parallel to this, the developer must execute plenty of other relevant activities to arrive at the final capex. Some of these activities include preparation of tender documents for several packages, including wind turbine foundations, cables, electrical infrastructure, contract negotiation with suppliers, and finally supplier selection. Although we show the activities as a simple list on the slide, the process is complex. Many tasks are interconnected and depend on input from several other activities. Going through the planning phase requires significant human resources. It's not uncommon for the developer to have between 30 to 50 full-time employees working on this project stage. Although reaching FID is a tremendous achievement for any development team, the project still must face the challenge of managing the execution of the contracts. The skill set and staff required during the execution stage are different from the one in the project development phase and will highly depend on the type of contracting structure selected. In many ways, an EPCI contract strategy will be easier to handle as the interface the developer needs to manage is limited. Experience from the global offshore wind industry shows that it is crucial to keep a close eye on the quality inspections and fabrication yards. As mentioned before, South Korea has highly skilled personnel and companies with relevant fabrication experience, which helps reduce the risk of significant quality issues. Nonetheless, the fast pace of offshore wind projects and the volume of work required to deliver a medium-sized project are sufficient to jeopardize the project installation schedule. The knock-on effects of delays during fabrication are not easy to mitigate, let alone eliminate, during offshore installation. As vessels are typically booked years in advance, the window for accommodating delays is limited, and the remediation is usually taxing on the overall project economy. In the final stage of the execution phase, the development team focuses on ensuring that the contractors complete the offshore works according to specifications. Acceptance tests and commissioning require skilled staff with previous offshore wind experience, which may not be available in South Korea. Transferring to operations can be a lengthy process in which the EPCI team needs to hand over thousands of documents to the operations organization. The final milestone for the project is the commercial operations date. The project is complete, and the start of operation marks the point at which the developer can start to see incoming revenue and the validation of the business case. To recap, allow me to mention 3 key takeaways from this presentation. 1. Plan ahead. Take into consideration regulatory matters and technical solutions from the beginning of a process. 2. Be bold and choose the right team and suppliers. In a global sector like offshore wind, the best people and companies may not necessarily be close to you. 3. Embrace global experience and local know-how and ensure that each party learns from each other. Thank you for your attention. We hope that the presentation has helped you understand the main challenges when developing offshore wind projects in South Korea.
네, 산티아고
Well, that was the presentation by Santiago Paredes. He was the head of winter and tower development. This brings us to the end of the first session, the keynote speech and thematic presentations. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of the speakers. Now I'd like to move on to the discussion session. I'd like to take my microphone to Chung Sun Nam, who will be moderating this discussion session. Please give a big round of applause.
이후 진행은
Now I'll let Mr. Chung to moderate the discussion. Good morning once again. Thank you very much for inviting me to here. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the speakers, Professor Cho Yong-sung, Mr. Lee Han-woo, Director Hwang Jun-ho, and Mr. Santiago Paredes Pinjon. Before we start the discussion, I'd like to thank Mr. Pablo Gandara, the EU IURC coordinator, for joining us with a pre-recorded video due to the pandemic. Let's take a look at the video.
Good morning. My name is Pablo Gandara, and I am coordinating a project of the European Union called IURC, International Urban and Rural Cooperation. I would like to share with you in a few slides what we are doing in Asia and with Asian cities, including cities of Korea. So let me start by telling you that the IURC is a global program which is implemented in 9 countries of Asia and Australasia, including the Republic of Korea. We support cities in identifying short-term actions and areas for cooperation to develop pilot projects. This should contribute to the sustainable development of cities. We work in 9 countries, as you can see over there, covering East Asia with Japan and Korea, Southeast Asia with Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia, South Asia with India, as well as Australasia with New Zealand and Australia. The background of our cooperation is the Green Deal of the European Union, the new policy package towards sustainable development of the Union, also the recovery package to come out of the crisis, of the COVID-19 crisis, in a sustainable manner, also to fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals and the urban agenda goals of the European Union. We build up on the experiences of the IUC, which is the first phase, so to say, of our program that was implemented between 2017 and 2020. Europe is a continent of the small and medium-sized cities. This should be kept in mind. Whenever you're working with Europe, you're dealing mostly with small cities, most of them actually much smaller than 5 million inhabitants. Only 7% of the population of the European Union live in cities larger than 5 million euros. So we have a predominantly polycentric urban system. The project of the IURC, we create shared value. We build long-lasting partnerships among cities. We try to identify pilot projects to exchange knowledge, to identify champion cities, maybe YEOSU, maybe Wonju, maybe other cities from Korea. We exchange best practices and we contribute to a deeper understanding of city decision makers from Asia and from Europe towards developing joint solutions to global problems. We concentrate on specific topics, the ecological transition, the Green Deal, as I mentioned, also the urban renewal and the social cohesion. Inclusive city is here the key word. And we also focus on the third area, which is the innovative, sustainable, and carbon neutral society, which has a very strong focus on job creation and innovation. In all the projects that we implement in the cooperation with the cities, we try to involve partners from research, from business, and from civil society to work together with cities, with local governments. This is what we call the quadripartite approach, to identify champions and institutions that will be able to take forward this cooperation beyond the project lifecycle. As you may see over there, our project has just started implementation in this year. We're going to work for about 3 years, and we are having several thematic webinars and networking events online that we would be very happy if you could join these ones. We also have some funding for our selected cities that they can apply for. This is a competitive fund. It's an award that will be probably launched in the second half of next year. In the Republic of Korea, so far, we have identified 3 cities that are going to be paired up with cities of the European Union. 3 Korean cities are Busan, Seoul, and Sejong. And these will be working with Rotterdam, Dublin, and Sofia. And they are going to focus on Green Deal areas, including energy transition and circular economy, with a strong focus, crossover focus on smart city and digitalization. If some of the cities from this YEOSU summit would be interested in joining us, please contact us and we will let you know which are the modalities for a cooperation with the IURC. You may see some of our activities in our website. For example, here, a forum that we did implement with Bangkok on the green cities, green development possibilities, basically developing public green areas in the city. We did also launch the country cooperation with New Zealand and with Malaysia last week, as well as with Japan. So I would be very much happy if you could join us, if you're interested in contacting us, and I wish you a very good and successful summit. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
네, 조금만.
Thank you very much for the insightful remarks. So some of the remarks from Pablo Gandara regarding social cohesion actually resonates with the messages mentioned in the presentations. It is also impressive that it is related to job creation. Now, Europe has only less than 7% of its population in large cities with more than 5 million people, so the transitions are happening with the focus on small cities. And I believe that Solasido and YEOSU can be great partners for the EU IURC. Next, I'd like to invite our discussants to the stage. For those of you who will participate in the discussion, please come forward to the stage and take your seats.
오늘 기조 강연 및 발표를 해주신 분들에 이어서
So I'd like to now introduce today's discussants. First, we have Mr. Kim Shin-nam, Director of Jeollanam-do Province Energy Industry Division. We have Mr. Professor Lee Sang-chan from Mokpo University. Who used to serve as the director for Academia Industry Cooperation. We have Kang Sang-in, the Chief Research Fellow of Korea Environment Institute. Pablo Gandara, coordinator of IURC, has sent his video we have just seen. We don't have much time. I will give you 3 minutes for each discussant. First, I'd like to invite Professor Jo Yong-sung to make his comments. So I have looked up the energy consumption numbers of Jeollanam-do Province. Now, the province is the second largest first energy producer, following Gyeongsangbuk-do Province. Now, Gyeongsangbuk-do Province is number one due to the nuclear energy production, but when it comes to Jeollanam-do Province, it has the highest share of renewable energy. And at the same time, final energy consumption, when it comes to final energy consumption, Jeollanam-do Province is also Korea's number one. It's because of the industry using a lot of oil. But I believe that the province is going through industrial transition. And I believe the challenge, a key challenge for us, is energy supply for buildings. And the energy necessary here is not just electricity, it's also about heat for hot water and heating. Then how can we supply that? We can utilize wind power, bioenergy, geothermal energy, and so on. So we need the diversification of energy supply portfolio. And as I mentioned earlier, what's more important than supply itself is to create a circulation system, including the disposal of wind turbine blade and solar panels. And it's important to produce a lot of renewable energy, but at the same time, matching the energy production with consumption. If we have to send a lot of electricity produced by renewable energy, we would have to build a lot of distribution lines, which will lead to many problems, like we saw in Miryang. Next, who will bear the cost, and how can we pay for the renewable energy production? And as it was mentioned in the video, the best approach here is to encourage citizens to participate in renewable energy production. If citizens participate in the production from the beginning, we will be able to reduce the burden of cost. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Cho. You emphasized the need for diversification of portfolio and dealing with the issue of renewable energy production waste. And now only 30% of the energy produced in the Jeollanam province is used within the province, and the rest is sent to Seoul and other areas. So what should we do with this 70%? Should we build more distribution capacity or find new match of energy consumption within the province? And Professor Zhou also raised the issue of the budget. Thank you. I'd like to now invite Mr. Hwang Junho. Thank you. So as I emphasized a couple of times in my presentation, when we establish a national policy, we tend to focus on a single sector. In many cases, we lack a holistic approach, unfortunately. So a key message regarding renewable energy I wanted to deliver today was we need a good match between renewable energy supply and demand. And for the match to be realized, we need a detailed implementation strategy. So carbon neutrality, or RE100, should not remain just as declaration or concepts. They should be accepted as real concepts. And this will be possible only when we have many open forums between the public and the private sector actors. But I believe we have a lot of room for improvement in that manner. Of course, we have to consider criticism, but this should be also discussed openly in forums like this. And that'll be also very helpful in encouraging citizens to participate in the initiatives, as pointed out by other speakers. Now, people on the demand side should be considered always when we make decisions. And now, cities or urban areas serve as vehicles to provide economic opportunities and carbon neutrality opportunities. And in many cases, we have had a supply-side centered approach in developing cities and urban areas. Now is the time that we need to shift the focus to the demand side, so that we can use the concepts of carbon neutrality and RE100 for local economic development. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Hwang, for your comments. Solar CEDO project took a lot of time in implementation. And now, actually, Solar CEDO is the only corporate city envisioned by the late President Roh Moo-hyun that is left from the 7 corporate cities originally planned. So for the project to be successful, we need support in many aspects, including administrative, economic, and industrial. And I believe Mr. Hwang raised the need for those support. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Kim Shin-nam from the Jeollanam, the provincial government. Now, the provincial government can provide a critical momentum for the success of carbon neutrality. Mr. Kim, please go ahead.
전남도의
Well, I'm Kim Jin-nam from the Energy Industry Department of South Jeolla Province. I've listened to these presentations that were very great, and about the carbon neutrality, I think it is a very important mandate for our province. Not just our local authorities, government, but businesses in our province can face a threat coming from this target of net zero. Yeosu, Suncheon, Gwangyang, they are the cities that are producing much CO2 because they are housing the steel and chemical industries. And we also have the shipbuilding industry in our own province, which is also a large emitter of CO2. So our provincial government is aware of the existing constraints. How we produce renewable energy and how to deploy the renewable energy. As far as a production, we are making systemic approach, such as offshore wind power. However, the acceptance is an issue for us, and the deployment is another issue. So we are trying to build the effective grid, and we are having a discussion with the central government right now to tackle this issue. And as was mentioned by the Sollashi presentation, the central government is introducing this distributed energy consumption strategy, and we are discussing strategies aligned with such central government's direction. But about focusing on demand-driven approach, our Jeolla province have somewhat behind. We are behind in terms of this renewable energy development and deployment. So we are looking for various ways to generate incomes for our residents, and trying to connect our renewable energy generation projects with the projects of other provinces and the central government. We are encouraging civil engagement, and in this process, we try to create jobs for our residents. To achieve net zero, Jeolla province, of course, we are considered as a laggard or backwater region across Korea, but we want to make a leap forward to lead in this industry. And especially as for RPS, I think that RPS deployment in the regional areas is a great idea. We are increasing RPS providers, but the new renewable energy that we are developing right now, if the Seoul metropolitan area has a very low supply, we can provide our renewable energy to the Seoul area, the greater Seoul area. This is a very great idea, so we would like to put much more thought into this approach. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for your input. The offshore wind power can be used as an engine for job creation, and Yeosu Gwangyang area is the area that has the largest CO2 emission, as was just mentioned, and this should be considered when developing a renewable energy portfolio. And this should be connected into the other projects to create jobs in this area. So we listen to the director first, and wanted to move on to Lee Sang-woo from the Korea Energy Agency. It is because the Korea Energy Agency, which is a new name, has a practical programs with budgets and detailed guidelines. Therefore, Korea Energy Agency is playing a very important role here. So net zero and renewable energy, they are remaining 2 or 3% right now. But like Germany or other European countries, we have to increase this proportion to 30% by taking very drastic and innovative measures. So I'd like to hear about that from Lee Sang-woo. Well, I'm not Lee Sang-woo. I'm here. My name is Lee Han-woo, and I'm here on behalf of Lee Sang-hun from our Renewable Energy Center of KEI. Of course, there are various ideas to achieve the goal that you have just laid out, but as I explained during my presentation, how to industrialize, how to make renewable energy as one proper industry is a very crucial issue. And how we consume the power from offshore wind power farm through grid, and how we connect this with our RPS program. These are also very important issues that can be connected into with the other various keywords like green hydrogen. And if you need our help to make that possible, we are very much willing to participate in such project. When I was first dispatched to Jeonnam area, the first impression I got is that in this industrialized era, why Jeonnam has not received much attention from the central government. But if we enter this green energy era, then Jeonnam area has a great potential to make a further development by leveraging its green energies and the green natural environment. And I paid much attention to this potential, and after seeing the Solar Shido project and the strategy that just has been explained by Kim Shin-nam from Jeolla province, I think that I should continue to have high hopes for Jeolla province as well. And I think about the question you have just raised about the question you have just raised, we should have some separate discussion later, because this requires a much longer time. Yes, I believe that Lee Han-woo from Korea Energy Agency will continue to give us substantial support.
Now, Professor Lee Sang-chan, please go ahead. So, according to the 2019 Korea Energy Agency numbers, 8.6% of the electricity came from renewable energy. Of these, about 25% came from solar and wind power. About 5% came from wind power, and most of the wind power is onshore wind power. So the offshore wind has a very little share in Korea. By contrast, globally, there are 29 gigawatt capacity of offshore wind, and according to estimates, it's going to grow by 16% annually to reach about 170 gigawatt in capacity. So in Korea, offshore wind has a small share compared to onshore wind and solar, and the main reason is the cost. According to 2018 Bloomberg numbers, the LCOE for offshore wind was 167 euros back in 2017, but recently it decreased by more than half, which is much less. And the LCOE for offshore wind is much less than nuclear power, and even less than solar power as of 2019. So what this illustrates is that the LCOE will decrease further if we build a large offshore wind capacity. And according to International Energy Organization, the LCOE of offshore wind will decrease from $274 to $161, and it's going to decrease further. So these numbers will be very attractive for investors. And the key is to secure the central government support for the massive budget to build a large-scale offshore wind facility. For example, the central government can designate an area to provide support for the offshore wind facility. Thank you very much, Professor Lee. Now, solar power and biomass account for the largest shares in renewable energy due to cost issues, but the central government has to provide new types of support to diversify the portfolio. Moving on to Chief Research Fellow Kang Sang-in from the KEI. I was conducting research in the Kyoto mechanism in the mid-1990s, and that was when many people raised questions like, why should we consider emissions reductions? But more recently, many people now realize that we have to deal with climate change and actually climate crisis. And a key would be cooperation between cities. This is also recognized by the European Union, and that is why the UEA summit is significant. So we talk a lot about energy transition for carbon neutrality by 2050. And now the key here is not technology. We already have the technology, and the issue is cost. And to overcome the issue of cost, the central government has to send clear signals to the private sector on the transition, and the private sector has to follow the global trend to make massive investments. And there are some challenges, as we all know. Now, the renewable energy is power generation is variable depending on time, and for that we need to build more grid infrastructure and energy storage facilities. In particular, when it comes to solar power capacity, some facilities now have more than 15-year-old panels, which creates opportunities for new types of panels and new technologies. This once again shows that energy transition must be systematic based on long-term plans. I hope we could also deal with these technological challenges and system challenges in the Renewable Energy Forum. And we need to also deal with the issue of environmental degradation, in particular regarding wind power. In Europe, some impacts have been reported against birds, marine mammals, and so on. And Europe has accumulated experiences regarding the protection of the fauna from adverse impacts of wind power. We need to learn from that.
환경 문제하고
So environmental issue and the renewable energy issue and increasing deployment of renewable energy, these two issues are conflicting with each other. So we have to try to expand the renewable energy without the degradation in the environment. We have to conduct a strategic evaluation so that we can have a closer look at the cost and time necessary for deploying renewable energy. And the fundamental reason for the net zero is to address environmental challenges. So these two issues have to complement each other. That was the key message from our last panelist. With this, I'd like to conclude the panel discussion with our speakers and discussants. So let me, before the conclusion, let me just give you a summary. Professor Cho Young-sung, he is in the academics, and he chaired various energy agencies, and he knows that our discussion on the net zero and renewable energy has evolved into asking why, from asking why into a must. I myself has been involved in the industry for a very long time, so I had this perspective limited to the industry. But I realized that we have to break out the existing mold to find a breakthrough to expand deployment of renewable energy. That is why I'm thinking that I have to just break this existing mold, or I have to think outside the box. And now we are at a stage to discuss implementation and the methodologies for implementation. That was laid out by Lee Han-woo with his roadmap. And we also took a look at the challenges we face on the field, about the economic feasibility and the acceptance of residents. These are the very big issues that you face when you try to deploy renewable energy on the field. The researchers and the central government officials and the academic scholars, they are all saying that the financing is very important. Now, if we don't have any economic feasibility model or the model that can guarantee profitability, investment would be very hard to come by. So that if we do not have such high economic feasibility, we need to change some models to get some investment from the financial sector. With this, I'd like to conclude, and I'd like to express my gratitude to all of the participants. Now, to conclude, we'd like to include the followings in the declaration for YEOSU Summit. So do we have this YEOSU Summit declaration?
네, 굉장히 중요한 선언문이기 때문에
I think this is a very important declaration, so I will just stand up. Through this forum, the followings will be suggested to be included in the YEOSU Summit. For energy transition, we have to reduce energy demand for traditional energy sources, increase energy efficiency, and expand the renewable energy so that we can become an energy independent city with energy sustainability. While leveraging renewable energies, including wind, solar, and others, we will facilitate energy transition through international cooperation. We recognize the situations we are in, and based on this situation, we will develop a prompt and well-designed plans and suggest such plans to the international community. This will be included in the YEOSU Summit declaration, and they are based on our discussion in this renewable energy session. I'd like to open the floor so that we can receive some inputs and feedbacks from the audience, and if there's none, we'd like to decide that this is included in the YEOSU Summit declaration. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of the audience who are watching this Regeneration Forum via online. This brings us to the end of the International Forum on Renewable Energy. Now I'd like to hand my microphone over to the MC of this International Forum. Thank you very much. I'd like to extend my gratitude to all of the participants of this International Forum. After this forum is ended, we'd like to have a group photo session with all of the participants. So please come up to the stage for a group photo session. With this, I'd like to conclude all of the plans and agendas planned for the 2021 UEA YEOSU Summit International Forum on Renewable Energy. Thank you.
앞쪽으로 위에서 해야만 이게 뒤에 보이죠. 네.